All right, well, it's 2:30, so I'll go ahead and announce the session and get this started. Welcome to the United Leukodystrophy Foundation's 2021 Virtual Family Conference. Today at 2:30 p.m. Central, we have Lisa Brackbill with the Leukodystrophy Newborn Screening Action Network. And I would like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube by July 15th. So if you wish to watch again, share with your family and friends, share it wide and far. It will be available on the ULF office YouTube account. So without further ado, you can take it away, Lisa.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Brackbill and Melanie Rumble is also on this call, but we're actually going to start with a video. So if you wouldn't mind playing that, Jose, we are ready. Within the leukodystrophy community, many of us feel compelled to try to change the world because our own world has been shattered. But this is often easier said than done. With each state making its own rules, and with science moving faster than bureaucracy, it can often seem too complicated to even try. That's why we created the Leukodystrophy Newborn Screening Action Network to make this journey a little easier. My name is Lisa Brackbill, and I'm a wife, mother, and advocate. I partnered with Cure MLD to create the LD-NBS Action Network 4 years after my daughter, Tori, passed away from Krabbe leukodystrophy. Tori's diagnosis and death inspired me to become involved in newborn screening advocacy in Pennsylvania, and I'm now continuing this work with the Leukodystrophy Newborn Screening Action Network. The LD-NBS Action Network is a coalition of advocates dedicated to championing newborn screening for leukodystrophies and lysosomal storage disorders. We do not believe in wasting time and resources by starting from scratch with each new disorder. Instead, we want to build partnerships to advance the goal of newborn screening together. Our goal is to equip advocates with the research we've done and the resources we've developed. Our website has up-to-date newborn screening maps for ALD, Krabbe, and MLD, so you can quickly see which states are screening for which disorders. Clicking on a state yields useful information about how conditions are added. We've also created easy-to-follow steps to prepare you for advocacy: knowing your disease, knowing your state, and knowing your story. We have a frequently asked questions page to help you navigate potential challenges. And most importantly, we have the ability to connect you with fellow advocates in your state to learn from past experiences. Advocacy can be a challenging, long, and emotional experience, especially for those of us who are parents of leukodystrophy children. That's why we're here, to make the work a little easier and the burden a little less heavy. We may not have all the answers quite yet, but we know where to find them and we know who to ask. We're ready to do the work. For more information and to get in touch, please visit ldnbs.org.
So thank you, Jose, for sharing that video. That's a video Lisa and I worked on a couple months ago just to introduce the world to the Leukodystrophy Newborn Screening Action Network. So my name is Melanie. I'll keep my introduction brief because I really want to hand it off to Lisa, who's the brains and the bronze of the operation. But I started working with Cure MLD about a year ago to date. And from there, started working with Maria on MLD newborn screening, and Maria and Lisa had started collaborating with the idea of creating this leukodystrophy newborn screening action network so that we can combine efforts and not duplicate efforts that have already been done in other disease states, in other similar disease states, other leukodystrophies and LSDs. So I'm really honored to be able to work with Lisa on this project. And with that, I'll hand it off to her so she can talk a little bit more about what we are, what we do, and why we do it.
Thank you, Melanie. As you heard in the video, my name is Lisa Brackbill, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for Policy and Advocacy for LDNBS, as we like to call it. I entered the leukodystrophy world, as many of you did, reluctantly. When my daughter, Tori, was diagnosed with Krabbe, I was determined to do something to make a difference, as so many of us are. The more I learned about newborn screening, the more I realized that my political science degree and lobbying background were perfectly suited for my new reality, as much as I didn't want this to be real. And I knew that this was my life's calling. I've been advocating for 6 years, and I finally saw hard work come to fruition in May of this year when Krabbe became part of the newborn screening panel in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, where I live and where Tori was born, Hannah's Law already existed, but there were loopholes in the system that prevented it from being implemented. So I realized early on in my advocacy that there were much deeper issues that we had to solve. First of all, Pennsylvania was not screening for everything on the RUSP, but even worse, every hospital in Pennsylvania was screening for different things. There were 2 panels, basically, one of 10 mandatory diseases and 27 at the time, kind of optional. And so every hospital was picking and choosing, which meant that in Pennsylvania, the zip code issue was even worse, because if you were born in a rural area with a rare genetic disease, the likelihood of it being on the screening panel for that hospital was very, very unlikely. So I worked with the Newborn Screening Advisory Board to identify these issues, and it took 5 years and 3 different pieces of legislation, because 2 of them failed due to partisan politics, which are very brutal here in Pennsylvania. But now Pennsylvania is RUSP compliant. Hospitals screen for everything on Pennsylvania's panel, and we're up to 63 conditions now. Legislation is no longer needed to add conditions. The authority has been given directly to the advisory board, and Krabbe became mandatory by default. I learned a great deal through these years, and there's always more to learn. And I'm hoping to be able to pass along the lessons that I've learned in a meaningful way, because this is absolutely what I was called to do. So when I was approached by Maria Kafalis in April of 2020 about this idea for a unified leukodystrophy newborn screening effort, I immediately joined in. There are so many incredible organizations that are doing amazing work, and we aren't trying to take over anything that is or has already been done. Far from it. We simply believe that even more amazing work could be done if we all came together instead of working on our own. To date, I've spent well over 100 hours doing research, making connections, and compiling all of this data to help advocates, and all of this data is available on our website. You can either look state by state, or my beloved spreadsheet with everything on it for every state that we have found so far is there. And I believe all of it, every piece of data is a piece of the greater puzzle of how we can accomplish these things in each state. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that as advocates and as organizations, we can have a far greater impact by working together than by working alone.
And so I think what we had envisioned for this session is we wanted to use it as an opportunity to meet a lot of other people who are interested in newborn screening and newborn screening for LSDs. So we have our website, which has a lot of different tools that I think would be useful to look at. So we're happy to go through some of these things. Depending on what people are interested in, we also just love to meet whoever's on the call here. So we could turn on our videos, have a conversation, really keep it kind of flexible, and just learn about what everybody else is doing, and why people are interested in this, and how we might even be able to help. So Lisa, I don't know, you probably know more people than I do on the call, but maybe you could just start leading the discussion, calling some people.
I do recognize a few family names on there, and leukodystrophy parents, but there are names I don't recognize. So yeah, if there's anyone that would love to introduce yourself, your state, your connection to leukodystrophy advocacy, or if you have any questions for us, please ask away.
Hey, Lisa, this is Sandra Gary with Krabbe Connect, and I just want to applaud your efforts or what you're doing to collaborate and advocate for as many diseases as we can get information for. So hats off to you for doing a great job, and I really applaud your efforts and want you to know that.
Thank you so much, Anne. That means a lot.
Well, I'll say hello, if that's okay. I'm Carol Cross, and this is my daughter, Laura. And we're a Krabbe family. We lost our son, Joshua, over 20 years ago. And Laura was transplanted as a newborn when she was just 19 days old. So I recently was appointed to the Congenital and Inherited Disorders Advisory Committee in Iowa. And I'm really excited about that. And that's the advisory committee that recommends diseases for the panel to the Department of Health. I tried to work with my legislator 2 years ago. She introduced a bill with about maybe 12 other people co-signing to add Krabbe to the panel, and it didn't even make it out of subcommittee. We have a lot of partisan problems as well. In Iowa, pretty strong here, and so that was really unfortunate. So then I tried to really call the director of the advisory committee a lot and talk to her a lot, and she finally asked me if I'd like to be on the committee, and I said, yeah, I really would. So we're excited in Iowa. The NPS 1 and Pompeii were just the decision was just made to pursue feasibility studies to get them added to our newborn screening panel. So those are the first leukodystrophies that are kind of making their way into our state. So my kind of subtle goal is to say, Krabbe can be tested just right along with them. Could we look at that as well? And so that's kind of in the back of my mind. And so Iowa is one of those states that you get actually a 4-for-1 deal. So Iowa also tests for Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, and of course Iowa. So I'd really like to see Krabbe coming and all of the leukodystrophies that are feasible for newborn screening. So I'm glad to be here, and I think this is a great thing to do to kind of get us all in a network together. And I have felt a little bit alone trying to do this effort. So I'm really thankful for you all making this happen. So glad to be here.
And we're so excited, especially that you were able to get on the advisory board. That is amazing. And I'm so glad you highlighted the importance of Iowa, because that's something we discovered along the way too. And we thought the same thing, like this is the perfect place to start because the 4-for-1 deal. So we are very, very hopeful about Iowa, and we're so excited that you were able to get into that role.
Oh, Maria, you're muted.
I want to make sure that Carol's invited to our event October 15th here in Philadelphia, Carol, because Melanie and Lisa are hosting a training session for advocates, and we would love for you to be part of our Iowa delegation. That would be amazing. So offline, we can make sure you get that invitation, and we'll be providing scholarships for families to come out, and might be a nice trip to Philadelphia. So to network with other folks, but that's amazing. Amazing.
That sort of reminds me of some of the research that you've come across, Lisa, too, with finding like these hubs of screening. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what you found there.
So in my beloved spreadsheet, because I'm a total data geek, as I was going along, I don't even remember.
Guys, you can look it up in the chat. You can click up. You can click on your data sheets in the chat.
Oh yes. So I don't even remember what led me down that rabbit trail, so to speak, but I discovered that not every state has their own lab. There are several states that use PerkinElmer, including Pennsylvania, which means that they don't have an excuse for not adding these conditions except for money, because the lab has the capability. A lot of states, that is a hurdle. The labs don't have the capability, but Iowa is a hub, Oregon is a hub, which is why New Mexico has yet to add Krabbe, even though that's been law for longer than I've been in this world. So it was fascinating. Massachusetts screens for most of most of New England. So if we can get these hub states online with even Pompeii and MPS 1, which they should already be screening for because those are RUSP approved, then it's going to be super easy to get Krabbe, which would be the next one, and then MLD pretty soon. So it's been so encouraging to see that maybe this isn't going to be as difficult as we had thought. We actually found out Mayo Clinic, Anne asked if Mayo Clinic was a hub. We found out that they screen for Kentucky's LSDs, but they don't screen for anything else or for anybody else. We were hoping that they did because hubs are good. So anyway, it's just been amazing to see how it's all connected, and we can knock several states off at the same time, hopefully.
Can you talk, Lisa, about I mean, my thought has been for advocates like Carol who want to do Krabbe, but they're in a state where Krabbe is not going to maybe get there now. It doesn't have all the box checked off yet. So, like, what do you? I mean, my thought has been like if you can do ALD, which is RUSP approved, that's a good way to build relationships. And I think like what Carol's done is getting on the board. That's amazing because now she has an inside track. So like, what do you think about like working on other LSDs to practice and get ready? Because maybe we're not there yet for Krabbe in that state. It's just not good because they don't have a mass spec or whatever, whatever the situation is.
That is exactly right. And I know for Iowa specifically, only because I talked to the lab, ALD is not there yet, but I think Carol's doing exactly the right thing with really pushing them to do Pompeii and MPS 1. But yes, in the other states where they're not yet screening for ALD, that is exactly what we're trying to get advocates to do. So like, I wouldn't naturally advocate or be drawn to advocate for exit-linked ALD because that's not my leukodystrophy. It doesn't mean I don't care about it, but as parents, we're drawn to our children's condition, our child's condition. And so what we're trying to encourage people to do is see the big picture, which is these are all connected. It can kind of be a snowball. So especially because, as Carol mentioned, if they're doing Pompeii and MPS 1, adding Krabbe is super cheap. So then they can't even really use money as a hurdle. We're trying to take all those hurdles away. That I'm not invalidating those. There are legitimate hurdles that these labs face, but if we can help guide them and get the ball rolling with the ones that are RUSP approved, then we will be in a great place once MLD comes around.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to throw out for this discussion is that getting newborn screening on, you'll look back at it and say, oh, that was the easy part, which is kind of scary because the other thing the labs have to do is develop a follow-up protocol, which is going to be constantly evolving and changing, right? So like when there's a new therapy or there's a new mutation found out, that they'll have to update the standards of care for the children. So one of the issues that you face when even if you get it passed, right, is you have to make sure there's medical teams that can refer the children and make sure the families are getting proper care. And then assuming the families are getting proper care, which is a big if, like in a state like Iowa, where there's only a small number of pediatric neurologists who would even know what to do with these children, they're going to have to cross state lines, likely to Minnesota, to receive treatment from a specialty clinic, which means Medicaid approval will have to cross state lines. So there's like all these other like tentacles of the problem. So we want to have advocates not simply looking at newborn screening, but we want you, Carol, to start thinking about, okay, how do I build relationships with Medicaid to make sure that Iowa Medicaid approves treatment out of state? Because we could have a situation where you're finding babies, but they can't see the best specialist to get the best chance. And then we're going to have these clinical trials, right? So you'll have clinical trials probably in hub cities like Chicago or, Minnesota or, Duke. And how are you going to get families out of Iowa, just I'm giving that as an example, to get to Duke or to get to Minnesota. So like there's all this stuff that we need to be thinking about as part of the action network. It's not simply, oh, you get newborn screening done, I go home. You still have to kind of figure out all these, and we need people on the ground in those states who know the doctors, who know the public health officials, who can speak to Medicaid officials in their state, because people in Iowa don't care about people from Pennsylvania. I mean, so we need to, our Iowa families are going to have to lead the charge. Anne has to run point in Florida. No one from outside Florida can make the case to Florida Medicaid for reimbursement. So there's like so much stuff that's going on in this story. And that's why Lisa's work is so brilliant. It's like, okay, I'm going to connect all these dots. Does that make sense? Sometimes I talk too much. I've had way too much caffeine today.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anyone else that would want to introduce themselves and talk about why you're interested in advocacy? We promise we're not scary. We just want to help, we want to learn your story and see what we can do to help.
Is that you, David, hiding there behind Bethany's Hope? Can you introduce yourself, David? David's amazing. He's an amazing advocate in Canada. David, oh, he might be away.
So Maria, to your point about all the different, tentacles and arms, there are a lot of advocacy groups in the different disease spaces that can help with some of those logistics as well. So, even getting these diseases screened for travel accommodations, getting referrals to hospitals, for Krabbe disease, facilities like Duke and the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center or the Children's Hospital Pittsburgh can help with getting some of those insurance and Medicaid costs approved. So there are a lot of support programs that can be useful for families when they get a newly diagnosed case of a rare disease. So,
hey, David, can you introduce yourself? Our man of mystery in Canada. Can you?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm celebrating the Montreal Canadiens. So for those hockey fans that are out there.
Can you introduce yourself? Because a lot of people here may not know about Bethany's Hope.
Yeah, Dave McIntyre. My wife is on one of the other computers in another part of the house. We're probably the grandfathers and mothers of this group. Our journey started in 1995 in Toronto. We now live in London, but we started raising money for research because there was nothing going on in Canada. And we actually were supporting researcher Dr. John Behringer at the University of Pittsburgh. But we went full circle with the ULF in that time. And oh, geez, I got a brain freeze. We rented Lorenzo's Oil and found the link that took us to, geez, now I do have a brain freeze. But anyways, we found John Behringer when we started supporting a research program for MLD, his research. We became a nonprofit organization in Ontario, and we found out that we had to support a Canadian university. So we established a research lab here at Children's Hospital in London, and we've been supporting it for the last 25 years. Our Dr. Rupar, who's the director of our lab, is also the chair of the newborn screening panel committee here in Ontario, which is kind of handy, but every province is different. I think we're up to 23 diseases at this point in time. They're very close to adding ALD. In fact, Tony voted for ALD, but the committee turned it down, but he thinks it'll be successful the next time around, which is soon. I don't know exactly when. But of course, they're reluctant to add MLD, which is our disease to add. And until they have a viable treatment of some kind. And, you know, hopefully we're getting closer to that as a clinical trial. But, you know, I watched the presentations this morning and now, and I see all these heard all these wonderful stories. Stories is not the right word, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. Heartbreaking, to say the least. But the work that's being done around the globe and things like Lisa, what you're doing, and Maria, the Cure MLD site, fills that void, a vacuum for us, because we've concentrated 100%, pretty much 100% of our time raising money for that lab and keeping it going. We're the only funder for that lab. We have 2 PhD plus Dr. Rupar, and you know, it takes a lot of money to keep that going. Unfortunately, COVID set us back for a year. They shuttered the lab and closed the hospital, the ward where they were researching. But you know, newborn screening, family advocacy, you know, joining a group like this fills that void for us as far as knowing what else is going on, not just with our heads down, going from a gala to a rock concert to a raffle. In fact, I had to interrupt this morning to do the draw for a weekly raffle to raise money while we're waiting for, we're still in lockdown here in Ontario, so you can't do anything. 5 people, that's pretty hard to raise 100,000 with 5 people, unless you have 5 good, rich friends. But so we're working very hard to get that up and running. But, you know, Lisa, I would love to be able to join. If you could increase your map to show Ontario, that'd be great. But, you know, it's anybody can apply to add a disease. You don't need a doctor's support here. It's very, but you got to have your ducks in a row before, you know, you make that application. And certainly we're hoping we get to that clinical trial, and then we could sort of start the process at least. But you know, as far as the work that's being done by Cure MLD, I mean, we've embraced that 100%. We've added to our website to encourage our families, which we don't have a lot of by any stretch, but to get involved and do the natural history studies, so important. And, you know, the Center of Excellence, of course, CHOP, you know, it's a wonderful organization. So we hope to get more involved in newborn screening, and maybe this is our kick in the butt to do it.
Yeah, well, definitely, again, I'm going to push you guys, the McIntyres, to come back to Philly in October, and we'd love to learn more about what we can do in Canada, because MLD is getting closer. We're about, I would say, 4 years out, but, you know, with the pilot here in New York and the one in Birmingham, we will be ready to get into Canada soon. And I think ALD is a great target of opportunity for Canada. It's an easier sell. And then we'll get to the next stage of, you know, Krabbe and MLD and other ones.
Sure. Well, maybe you're around London in November. Come to our gala.
I would love that. It's really hard for me to travel, but you know, Melanie can travel. I think I'm going to send Melanie and Lisa. Melanie and Lisa need to get out of because
yeah, we'll come.
I'm home with Cal, but I think Melanie and Lisa should definitely go to the gala.
Well, you know, it's important to show that there's strength in numbers. And absolutely. There's a Cure MLD organization out there, as wonderful as it is to show small little Bethany's Hope. I mean, we use Bethany's name in the foundation to put a face to the disease, as long, you know, as well as the other folks that are doing this. But certainly having other people out there telling their journey, it's very helpful to the crowd that's sitting there. It's not just crazy Dave and Lindy up there begging for money once a year, you know, at a dinner. But anyway, something to think about. November 4th, mark it on your calendar.
Definitely, whatever you need. It's just hard for me to travel, but yeah. And anyone else, I'm gonna let Lisa take over. But yeah, I don't know anyone else here. Oh, April, you know April, don't you? Lisa, April?
I believe so.
Yeah, April,
yes. Hey, sorry. Hi.
Hi, April.
Hey, I apologize for clicking in so late.
No apologies. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about what you've been up to and why you came to the meeting?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I love hearing you speak, and I love that I got a copy of your book. So I'm super excited about that. I kind of deep down wanted it to be signed, but Lisa will let you know how I am about that. I like my books to be signed. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to log on sooner, but I'd love to hear about the newborn screening process, watching what's happening in Georgia, hoping we can continue to model for the states that are around us. Very grateful that Ann had got me in to listen to a phone call that they were putting before the newborn screening panel for the Department of Health and Human Services. She knows that was a very emotional day for us, but they have agreed to do a pilot study, but they have not released the funds for the pilot study. In case I've missed something else, that's where we are. But at least it's been in front of Health and Human Services and DPH both at this point. So that's what we're leaning in for. And just unfortunately, but fortunately, connecting to some new families. So there is a newer family that we've had in our immediate area. We've been very fortunate that we got to meet them in person. So like I said, unfortunately, but fortunately, to connect with the new family and able to kind of present our little cluster in this neck of the woods as a group. So I'm actually learning to pace myself because I think I could be a bit of a crab egg groupie when it comes to meeting new families, and I have to make sure not to smother them and wait for them to be ready to have information paced out to them. So I'm trying to be a resource for knowledge, is also just a regular person to go back between both of those depending on what they need. So I'm not unintentionally overwhelming everybody. So I'm
I
learning.
think that is a great, I think that's a great way to approach it. We actually were just in a newborn screening conference last week, and there were people from Emory there. And I asked a question in the chat about Crab A, and they said they're aiming for September 1st. So
awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I made sure to ask. We had them right there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
In April, I'm going to again push the invitation. We're having this event in Philadelphia in October. We're going to be trying to get scholarships for folks to come up. We would love for you to talk about your work in Georgia.
Yes.
And build your Crab A squad, your Georgia squad that year. And
our Adaptive Hearts is the support group that we have.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's amazing. We'd love to hear about what you're doing and seeing how we can support you with materials. Lisa's been creating some amazing content that can help with your advocacy, and we also have scholarships for folks like to pay for parking and babysitters. Yeah. So because this is so much time consuming work. So like those are all things we would love to help out with. And you could also come meet some in Philly as a Crab A family. You could meet the clinical trial teams here at Passage. They will be in attendance. I think Dr. Escolar is planning to attend. So you can meet some of the researchers and hear more about the clinical trials that are coming down the pike for Crab A, which is really amazing, exciting.
Definitely. Okay, I need to set my sights for the end of this year so I can try to plan instead of things sneaking up on me. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, so October 15th, and
okay.
we'll be in touch, but and Lisa, and check out her website, but we really want to get people together networking and showcasing the work that they're doing and learning from each other. And Passage Bio is in Philly, so you'll get to meet the lead.
Oh, wow.
Right, you'll get the lead, so what is this gene therapy and what does it mean? And I think it's gonna be very important for you guys to learn about in the Crab A community, like to learn what this tech is. It's a very cutting edge treatment.
Thank you.
No, thank you. You're doing awesome work.
Oh, learning from the best.
No, I didn't do anything.
What I'm loving so much about getting to do this work is even just looking back 5 years ago, the landscape was so different. There was one treatment option. Now there are two. There were only 2 states screening when Tori was diagnosed. This is for Crab A specifically. And now there's almost 10. And so I just love looking at how this is shifting. There also were so many states without newborn screening advisory boards, and now almost every state has one. So I feel like it's, in a way, it's going to get easier and easier if we are all combining our efforts. And I just love this because we are a team. We didn't choose to be a team. Diagnosis made us one, but now we can choose to be a team in our efforts.
Yeah, we got drafted into a family, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, hi, Lisa. This is Ann Moser. And
Hello.
Hello,
I'm
Dr. Moser.
an
How are
advocate
you?
for ALD newborn screening. And I wondered if you're in touch with Elisa Seeger and the ALD Alliance, because they're working at the national level to try to get money for all the new RUSP additions, because not all states are screening for ALD. It's only about 50% of newborns in the US are screening for ALD. So we're going state by state now and trying to get money so that ALD newborn screening can be 100%.
Oh, absolutely. We love Lisa and we love everything that she has done. She is definitely one of the pioneers that we all have learned from and continue to learn from. Yeah, this whole state by state edition business is certainly tiresome.
It is very tiresome.
And Dr. Moser, we're actually also in the MLD community. We have two MLD gene therapy families, one in Ireland and one in the UK, who are leveraging ALD to get on newborn screening. So we actually, this is part of the network that we have an international group of advocates with direct experience with an approved gene therapy in the EU, which is really helping us move the conversation along there as well. And so I think that's another thing that, Elisa has done brilliant work. I mean, I just tell everyone, call Elisa Seeger. She's the expert on this. And that's the other advantage, that we actually have MLD families in the EU who have an approved therapy, so that gives them leverage to talk publicly, and the pharmaceutical companies can really lean into newborn screening in a way that they can't here yet, because there's no approved gene therapy. So we're taking this not only nationally but globally to really push the EU along.
That's
as well.
great to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad that Ontario will be screening for ALD soon.
Thank you. And again, the McIntyres are an MLD family. So it's all about crossing that disease boundary and saying, okay, we're gonna get these laws passed with advocates on the ground in the state. Minnesota started screening for ALD in Pompeii because of an MLD. Minnesota started screening for ALD and Pompeii and MPS because of an MLD family. So that's like where this idea came from. It's like, we don't need one disease, one NBS. We can do more than one thing at the same time. And I have to say, Dr. Moser, it's a great honor to meet you. You have done so much for our community. We wouldn't be having a conversation without you. So
it's great to meet all of you too. So keep up the good work and getting newborn screening for all the leukodystrophies.
We're going to get it done, Dr. Moser. We're going to get it done. ALD is going to be, it's
universal.
It's going to be a different disease. It's going to be a different disease very soon.
Actually, I would also like to invite Erilyn, am I saying your name right? Who's also interested in ALD newborn screening, to talk about your interest. Yeah.
Yeah, so I work with Ann Moser at Kennedy Krieger, and just would love to kind of get Maryland doing the ALD screenings in particular, as I'm part of the leukodystrophy clinic at Kennedy Krieger. And yeah, I guess in having some of these, just looking at, I was doing a DNP project, and it would have been so great to kind of be able to see how beneficial, obviously it is. And I had reached out to Lisa Seeger a couple of times just to kind of get some more information about maybe how best to promote this. And I mean, of course, Anne is doing an incredible job and the most that she can, but it just hasn't quite gotten there. And I've reached out to the lab a couple of times too. So yeah, just trying to kind of get any information that is out there. And I'm sure Anne is one of the best people to talk to about that. But if there's any other pursuits for just trying to how Maryland could be more of an advocate, as we have some of like the best people involved. I'm new to the team, so I'm not including myself, but there's quite a few resources available that just aren't utilized in the state of Maryland, unfortunately, if you're not doing the screenings early and or to kind of give a better outcome, perhaps.
What are the obstacles in Maryland, if you don't mind me asking?
I think Anne would know better than I would.
I think it's equipment, money for equipment. And they had to hire another person in the laboratory. So it's money.
We do have a Krabbe dad who is on, at least I think he's still on the advisory committee. So I can't give that answer right now, but I can definitely see what intel he might have. I know he had said the same thing you just said, Dr. Moser, about equipment, but the last time I talked to him about it was like 3 years ago. So I would hope something has changed since then.
Well, Maryland is screening for all the conditions on the RUSP except ALD. And so we're hoping that we can do some lobbying at the state level and get it going.
Have you, Dr. Moser, one angle that we've done in Pennsylvania that's been effective is we've leveraged the industry players. So could you work with Maryland Life Science? I don't know what they call it. Like in Pennsylvania, it's Pennsylvania Life Sciences and it's Mass Bio. Could you leverage the pharma industry and their political connections to help?
Well, Kennedy Krieger and Johns Hopkins have a huge impact on the state legislature.
Okay.
In Maryland. So
are they
lobby using our muscle with Kennedy Krieger and Johns Hopkins?
That would be good. And I think, I mean, so we found that very effective here in Pennsylvania. It was a very interesting conversation because there was Lisa doing this incredible grassroots advocacy, and she was making great progress, but it just needed a little bit of a tip. And so I spoke to Life Sciences PA, and I basically said to them, you guys like gene therapy? Well, then you should support newborn screening. And suddenly their lobbying team was like, really? Newborn screening? I remember their lobbyist said, what, newborn screening is good for gene therapy? And I said, yes, just ask Jim Wilson. And suddenly we had a new army of advocates working with Lisa. And so one idea is to, like, if there's an institutional player like Hopkins and their lobbying team, and they could say, well, Hopkins is the leader in this field. We are the home of the Mosers. We pioneered this work. This is our legacy. You can't let I always throw Boston under the bus. I always say, don't let Harvard take credit for what we did. Don't let Massachusetts, and so that really, and we do that in Pennsylvania very well. We always say, you can't let Massachusetts take credit for the work you're doing in Pennsylvania. So I think that if there's a way to mobilize Hopkins' very huge tentacles of influence with the legislators, that could get you the money. And you're saying, listen, you're holding us back for, I don't know, $750,000 or $1 million for a mass spec. Come on, guys, that's nothing. Don't you want to make history? So, that's just an idea.
Is there anybody else that would like to introduce themselves? No pressure, truly, but we just want to give you the opportunity.
Christy, can you introduce yourself? The amazing Christy DeMarco. Christy, can you hear me? She may be. I'll send her a message.
Oh, sorry, I was just muted.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on talking on this call, but just listening. But I don't know how amazing I am. But
well, you are.
I'm very. I am interested in getting involved in newborn screening for sure. I talked to Anne before about Refsum's disease and the ability to do newborn screening for Refsum, which I don't know that it's in talking with her, it's entirely possible until we get genetic newborn screening, in place, because our only biomarker currently is photanic acid, which doesn't accumulate in the blood at birth, from what we understand anyway. Refsum's 1 in a million, so not sure we know everything about it today. So, but with initiating Global DARE, hopefully we'll learn a lot more in the near future. So, but,
well, one thing
yeah.
I'm sorry, Christy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think one thing you're going to learn that has been the case with nearly every newborn screening I've ever worked with is that the incidence is far higher. Once you start doing genetic testing, you start finding it everywhere. And it's like the diseases have been far more widespread than anyone kind of guessed. So I think that's also an important thing to think about down the road. And the NIH is working on different tools for genetic testing. I feel like, I mean, and maybe others on this call, I mean, newborn screening is really important, but it's kind of like CDs. I'm not sure how long it's going to be the primary technology. I mean, we all anticipate that some kind of version of genetic sequencing will become the sort of way of the future. And so even if we're still talking about mass specs and dried blood spots, I think that it's important especially for a disease like Refsum, to think about, okay, well, how would sequencing work? What would that look like? And we've been starting the conversations in states to say to Pennsylvania, I said this to Pennsylvania as well, that if you want to be a true leader in gene therapy, you need to start thinking about genetic sequencing, because this technology is going to go away. And we're already seeing a lot. I mean, the NIH industry, there's billions and billions of dollars being poured into this. So I think that, and we don't want private industry to decide who's collecting information on every baby born in America or anywhere in the world. So I think that's can be part of this ongoing discussion, because while newborn screening is critical and Refsum is critical, it's going to go away and evolve into something else. And that should be part of the discussion now, because many of these diseases may never use dried blood spots. They may go to some sort of sequencing technology.
Just to echo that, the conference that happened this past month from the NIH, I feel like that was a really dominant conversation, actually. And Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I think we spoke about this, but there was one person who spoke about the project they were doing, and they were able to sequence from the time they got a baby's genetic material to the time that they sequenced it was 13 hours, which is super quick. And so there's a lot of people interested in furthering newborn screening in that way, which means, yeah, there can be a whole host of new possibilities.
And new challenges.
And challenges, yeah.
I don't think anyone wants, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg owning genetic information on every child born in the United States. And like one of the things that, you got to think about, like very soon, for a couple $100, any family could run a genetic sequence on their baby, right? And so it will be private. I mean, there's a lot of money to commercialize and privatize this, which really raises a lot of challenges. And one question is, can I get my disease on your panel, right? Can I get your disease included in my test? And we actually had one of our presenters talk about how there is a company that provides a test, and it screens for MLD, but not the rare mutation that their child had. So they actually did the genetic test and did not get the MLD diagnosis because they were an unknown mutation. Sequencing, WGS would have picked it up. So it's really like, this, and who owns that data now, right? Like, so they just sequenced all these families and it's, I don't know, $1,000. I mean, who owns that data? Who's curating that data? Like I said, I don't think we want private industry collecting that information. You think it's bad they know, how often you shop at Nordstrom's. Imagine if they know what diseases you're going to develop down the road. So it's a really exciting, but also vaguely terrifying and challenging time.
Yeah.
So for you,
As Maria had mentioned, we do have an event coming up in October for anyone that is interested in coming. It's a one-day event in Philadelphia. We have rooms set aside for everybody who's ready to fly to Philly, drive to Philly, come to Philly. We are going to try to have a virtual option because we do understand that not everybody can come, but we're just really excited about getting people together in one room and sharing our common goal, which is newborn screening for lysosomal storage disorders and leukodystrophies. So if you're interested, we do have a little bit of information on our website, and we will have more forthcoming as we continue to plan. But we are just so excited for all of you who are even here today to hear us talk about our brand new mission, because we are new. We come at this very humbly. We just, this is what now you know what we're trying to do.
The website is called ldnbs.org. I'll send it in the chat again. Also, if anybody has any questions about anything on the website, now would be a good time to ask. We can go through some of this stuff. Maybe we have about 10 minutes left. We could show Lisa's amazing spreadsheet.
can you show the spreadsheet a little bit? Can you share screen it?
Yeah.
It's awesome. This website is so cool. I love it. I had nothing to do with it. I just, they did it, but so I can compliment it.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. This is Christy again. So are you actually looking at genetic testing at newborn screening? I know most of it's been through blood spot and checking of biomarkers and things like that. Are you actually looking at genetic testing as well? I mean, for Refsum's disease, it would be amazing to have it on a newborn screening, because you can actually make a tremendous difference in the progression of the disease by identifying it earlier, because you can go on a special diet that
I think the people to talk to
progression.
So I think New York is really the innovative state. So I'm sure Melissa Wasserstein and her team are beginning to imagine what genetic testing, widespread genetic testing for newborns is going to look like. So I think I can absolutely introduce you to Melissa Wasserstein and Joe Orsini and Amy Gaviglio. They would know better kind of where the public health officials are on this. They tend to be a little reactive in this, but New York is really an extraordinary research driven. They're like 10 years ahead of everybody else. So I think that, I mean, we're not actively doing it because it's not a public health initiative right now, but it is in the NIH's kind of, like, the NIH knows it's coming, right? And public health officials like New York know it's coming, and they're quietly piloting programs. But I will tell you, Christy, that they're going to follow RUSP guidelines. So RUSP still remains very powerful. So like, just because they can test for things, they're not going to tell everybody everything. So for example, they're not going to tell people if they think their kid is going to get breast cancer unless the ethics review team say that's worth knowing, right? So there's like all these kind of bioethical guidelines in terms of what they will tell the parents of newborns. Does that make sense? So I think that's like,
yeah,
so you have to have a treatment. You have to have a treatment, and you have to make that kind of bioethical case.
Right.
But
in case of Refsum would have a treatment, but I can see where others might not, depending upon.
Exactly. Like, so we know that they have markers that predict pediatric cancers, and they don't include that in newborn screening, despite the advocacy of cancer patient families, because they're like, well, knowing you might get cancer one day is not going to improve outcomes. It's not like a metabolic disorder where you need pre-symptomatic. You can't treat the cancer before you have it. So that's an interesting question that is kind of constantly being reviewed and debated. They don't know the answer yet. Who's going to decide what you tell people? Like, I think they're leaning towards, like, they don't want parents to ask which kids will get Alzheimer's. They're going to let people decide for themselves as adults. Will you get Alzheimer's, or will you get a glioblastoma? They're not going to let parents find that out. Does that make sense at all? So it's a really interesting stew of questions.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Maria.
No problem.
So with these last few minutes, feel free to keep asking questions. Of course, you can interrupt me or put them in the chat. But I'll just show you what our website looks like. This is what we've been creating the past year or so, and it has a whole host of information brought to you by yours truly, Lisa Brackville. And so just as an example, we have this US map. So a lot of our research has been focused on the US because that's what we know the best, but we do have actually some information about newborn screening around the world. And so Dave, we would love to know more about Canada. But here is our US map. And when you hover over a state, you can find out how many conditions they're screening for. At a glance, you can find out which states are actively screening for ALD, which are actively screening for CRAB. And we're going to be updating this too shortly with other categories. And so when you go to click on a state, it will bring you more information about that state. It chose Pennsylvania because that's what Lisa and Maria have both been working on. It gives you the number of conditions screened, thanks to Lisa's law that was recently implemented that jumped from what, like 34 to 61?
Just about, yeah.
Oh my God, I'm pleased that I remember those numbers. Okay, and it tells you how conditions are added. I think one of the biggest myths is that you need legislation to pass or to get a condition added to your state. And I think that's something like Lisa will chant from the rooftops, is that you don't necessarily need legislation. In fact, most states go through an advisory board. And a lot of the work that newborn screening advocates have been doing is to add advisory boards to each state. And so that's a quick glance about like what our website might have in terms of what leukodystrophy and LSD newborn screening knowledge is out there. And then we have a lot of other resources, tips for sharing your story, our 3 pillars of newborn screening. But before I go into those, I just thought I'd showcase Lisa's wonderful spreadsheet, which has all the information on the map, but in spreadsheet form. So maybe you could explain this a little bit, Lisa.
So it started with just a few categories, mostly honestly like who was screening for what. But then I began finding other pieces of information that I thought, this would have really helped me 6 years ago if I had known this. And so it just keeps growing. And some of these things may seem kind of random, but where you see the black triangles in the right-hand corner of the cells, if you hover over that's where I explained why this matters. Because otherwise, like I said, it may seem really random, but I even have which lab does the screenings, as you can see, the ALD, CRAB-A, MLD, but also POMP-A and MPS1, because as we talked about, if a state's screening for those, it really is not difficult to add CRAB-A. So, so for those of you who prefer to view data like this, this has been my baby. And I love it because it's so easy to see everything.
It makes me cry. I love it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
As far as we know, nothing like this has ever been compiled. And so that's why we put so much time into it, because we wanted it to be there for any advocate that wants to view it in one place.
Mm-hmm. Basically anything Lisa wished that she had known, she is now provided. And I'll stop sharing for now, but if anybody has any questions about any of the resources that we have on our website, you can ask now. You can always email us. Lisa is lisa@ldnbs.org. Collectively, we're info@ldnbs.org, which is easy to remember.
Gotta do a big shout out to Dr. Gelb. Hi, Dr. Gelb.
Hi, is that Maria?
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself really quickly? You are the god of newborn screening.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm Mike Gelb, and I work at the University of Washington, and my passion is developing new technology for new and more, additional conditions for newborn screening, including, so we developed the technology for POMP-A and MPS1 and CRAB-A, and working on MLD and CTX and a bunch of other things. So thanks, Maria. Yeah, so anything that looks like a treatment is coming, or we would try to tackle. We're chemists, and we know how to develop assays. We're working on some of the newer things we're working on. Let's see. So I think Canavan disease is straightforward. We're doing a small study in Germany. There was some talk about Canavan disease. I don't know what other leukodystrophies.
Christy, have you met Dr. Gelb?
Yes, I have. Actually, at the last ULF meeting last year, he actually volunteered to do some testing, which we haven't quite got with him yet on. I think maybe Anne is actually conducting some food testing for us. And so I know Dr. Gelb was interested in getting involved as well. So.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yes, yeah, you're from last year. Yeah, I did a presentation on
I think I know.
last year.
I know a lot of you. I know Anne Rugari for more than 10 years, and most of you I've met before. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyways, thanks, Maria. I think MLD. I don't know. Yesterday, I think MLD is. We know how to screen for it, and probably you guys know about Screen Plus, right? Which is a very large prospective pilot study running out of New York, Melissa Wasserstein. So we're running 14 diseases there, including CTX and MLD and a number of MPS disorders, bunch of things. Leukodystrophies, CTX and MLD, yeah. I think, MLD, I think what would hold it up is getting the treatment approved in the United States, right, for the gene therapy, stem cell, plus the gene therapy, the orchard therapy, basically. I don't know. Is there any news about that, Maria?
No news, but I think, that's so critical. Like if you have to get this newborn screening up and running, which has been a real challenge for MLD, because it was a particularly tricky one to do, and Dr. Gelb's been working on it for many years. But yeah, so you can't get on the RUSP unless you have an effective therapy, and that becomes really tricky. We didn't really talk about that because that's one of I think the huge challenges certainly for MLD right now with RUSP and also Krabbe, because you have to have a therapy that the board deems really kind of effective. And what effective means can be a debatable point. And one of the challenges you have to keep in mind is, like, for us, there's a big debate in the MLD community about whether you go to RUSP and make the case that bone marrow transplants are a good therapy. Well, if we did that, one of the problems that we have, if we say, oh yeah, bone marrow transplants are great, that's going to undermine Orchard's argument that they have a better therapy. And that they should get reimbursed for it. So you want to be careful, like, what you choose to present to RUSP as your therapy, because it could have long-term implications for your ability to get reimbursement. And so Dr. Gelb's right. It's really going to be held up by. I'm confident we're going to get through, Dr. Gelb. It's just going to take some time. FDA ain't easy. FDA doesn't make it easy. So but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, I think, yeah, seems like the gene therapy, orchard therapy works better than just transplant alone. I think that's clear. So, Krabbe is, they just submitted again to the RUSP. I think newborn screening for Krabbe is under control. Anybody who says otherwise is just a little bit out of date. I mean, the precision that we can screen for Krabbe disease now with cycosine as a second-tier marker is about as good as it gets, I think. We don't have a big false positive problem that we initially saw in New York based on DNA sequencing. Now most lab screening for Krabbe are incorporating cycosine. There's still a few. New Jersey hasn't yet. Ohio hasn't yet. They're thinking about it, but Ohio is a little tricky. I'm not sure they're allowed to do the second tier as part of newborn screening, but I think they can. I think they just need to implement it. And New Jersey is talking about it, but hasn't started yet. I think, if you do cyclosine, you won't have very many false positives, very few. And so screening is a done deal for Krabbe, and it'll be interesting to see whether the RUSP thinks that the transplant therapy is, this Escalar-Kirchberg type of therapy. They think it works pretty well, but it remains, there's a lot of people that think it doesn't work as that great. And so it'll be interesting to see what the RUSP says. Yeah. I don't know, like Maria said, what does work well mean? I mean, none of these treatments are curative. What does work well mean? How long of a good life does it take to say work well? And nobody, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I don't think the committee knows what that means. I don't know how they're going to decide. Yeah, and they're supposed to tell us, right? You can listen in on the deliberations, but I don't know. By the time you get to hear them, I think it's already been decided and not a lot of decisions are made. So maybe you don't hear the whole story of what they're thinking, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with Krabbe. I don't know. There's mention of gene therapy for Krabbe. There's 3 companies working on 3 or 4 companies. I'm not sure the RUSP will buy that because it's not approved yet. It's not developed. So they want to, before they would screen every baby in the United States, they want the treatment to be a done deal, right? Not coming maybe, right? So there was some debate about whether to mention gene therapy in the Krabbe nomination. I was saying that if you mention it, they'll probably just say, we'll come back when you have the gene therapy, right? We give them an easy way out. But I was outvoted. The other committee people that were working on the RUSP thought it would be good to mention it as an optimistic component of Krabbe. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. They may very well say the treatment doesn't work well enough. Let's come back with gene therapy. That would be my guess, but who knows? Yeah.
It's such a catch-22 because without newborn screening, we don't have babies to treat to get the data. And so it's such a complicated thing.
It's a very complicated process. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to see is an interesting competition now between these companies doing gene therapy and patients. So how are, there's the Hunter's Hope put together a Krabbe disease consortium. We meet every month on the phone and we discuss cases that come through newborn screening, right? Or any other cases that are on the fence. They're not clear-cut, infantile. And we also produced a new published chapter on guidelines for screening and follow-up of screen-positive babies, right? We put them into various categories. We've clarified a lot the newborn screening process and what to do about it if you catch a baby. So we're a little talking about, so if Illinois finds a newborn Krabbe, so how are the parents going to decide which of 2 or 3 gene therapy trials to enroll in? And I have no idea. It's kind of like cancer, right? You might have a cancer and there's the only option are these clinical trials, and how do you decide what to do? I suppose, I don't know. So I guess each clinical trial site will have some sort of info pamphlet, and the parents and their PCP will have to read it and consider it. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's an interesting problem to have where we have multiple gene therapies for an ultra rare, horrific disease, and we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interject. I'm getting a message from the ULF that we have to shut this down soon, but it was really wonderful, I think, this session. Lisa, I'm going to let you have any closing remarks, and then we'll peace out for now.
Thank you all again for coming. As we've said, we may be a new organization, but we do have a lot of experience and a lot of passion. We have a willingness to learn. And most importantly, we have a great desire to see collaboration across disease states. So if you are interested at all in joining this effort, we would absolutely love to have you, because it's going to take every one of us to get these leukodystrophies added to newborn screening.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for the spreadsheet.
You're welcome.
How do we get the spreadsheet?
I believe there is a link
The
in
link
the
is in the
chat.
chat.
Oh, okay. I'd like to look at it. I have a lot of that information as well, and maybe I can give you some updated information.
Yes, please, because we've noticed it changes so quickly.
Changes a lot, yeah, and yeah, and a lot of it is not published by, some of these official, let's call them official sites like First Baby's Test. They're not up to date. Yeah.
Oh yeah, not at all.
Changing quickly. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, Dr. Gelb, I can send it to you. I can email it to you. All right. Yeah. So I guess we'll see each other later.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.